I'm Leroy Garcia, and this is Blue Rain Gallery Podcast. Today we're in the home studio, Hacienda Garcia. We are interviewing today Tony DeLuz, who is a new artist to our stable. Welcome, Tony.
Thank you, Leroy. It's great to be here.
Yeah,
and it's great to be anywhere, as they used to say.
Well, because of distance, sometimes we do these Zoom podcasts, which are okay. It's the best way to get some information out in a fast way. You're preparing for a show with us that's called Old Signs, Rusty Cars, and Some New Paintings. What I've come to like about your work is the diversity, and we'll talk more about that as we go along. Before we get started, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, how you got into art? Tell us about what mediums you really like to work in the most, and subject matter.
Sure. Originally from Boston, Massachusetts. I've been living in the Southwest for almost 29 years now. It'll be 29 years this June. I went to college at Eastern New Mexico University, even though I'm from Boston. I got to finally get out west. And after living in Boston for almost 20 years, we decided to move. Almost 15 years. We decided to move out west and spend the rest of our marriage out here. And so I live in Rimrock, Arizona, which is right near Sedona. And it's a beautiful place, beautiful country, very small town. Which really kind of calls into the stuff that I like to paint. I love to paint a lot of what people call Americana now. I kind of fell into it in college, the old signs, the old cars, road culture stuff. And I started painting it when I was in college. All of a sudden I figured out, hey, plein air art is fine, but I don't have to do it. I could actually work in my studio if I take pictures of my references, shoot my own stuff, and bring it where I want and paint it. I could take out what I want, put in what I want, and there you go. I was off and running. But the road, I've always been fascinated with that. I didn't learn to drive till I was 37, but I was a very good passenger.
That's awesome. Well, so were you into art since your early days in youth, or is this something that you developed out of coming through college?
Oh boy, I've been doing art ever since I can remember, and my earliest memory of doing art, and it's also the day I found out that my mother had artistic talent, was I was in kindergarten and I was drawing. I was about 4 years old. I was drawing these people that didn't have faces, and I did it that way because every other kid in class was drawing that way. And I brought it home and I thought, well, this must be right. This is how everyone else is doing it. My mother said, oh, those are nice, but where are the faces? I said, I didn't draw any faces on them. She said, well, let me show you how to draw a face. And then she whips out this piece of paper and draws this beautiful face. And that's the day I found out that my mother almost went to art school, but didn't. And ever since that day, I've been drawing faces on everything. It's that was the day.
Yeah, sounds like my mother. My mother's a very talented artist, but she raised 11 kids instead. So,
oh wow,
that's kind of
you and my wife will have to talk. Her father was one of 11, I think. But it was. Go ahead, Leroy. I'm sorry.
I was gonna say, yeah, it's Jim Bogle as well. Comes from a really big family. I think there's 11 or 12.
So. I'm one of four, one of five actually. I have another brother too, but I had a younger brother who passed away, and there are four of us left.
So the Luz name, it's Hispanic or Puerto Rican? What's your ethnicities? Yeah.
Luz is actually I'm half Cape Verdean. And Cape Verde is an island republic off the coast of Africa. It was a Portuguese colony.
Oh, okay.
DeLuz, my name had an E on the end of it, and my grandfather dropped it off on the way across the ocean, apparently. Right. And he was in Nantucket Island when they first came here, and they it stayed off ever since, DeLuz, and it does mean of light in Spanish, which is people always will say, did you, like in Sedona especially, did you come up with that name? Like, oh no, it's my name. It's
well, those two territories conquered each other at least 1 or 2 times. So there's been integration of Spanish and Portuguese in certain areas.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
And yeah, and I'm a lot of races.
Yeah.
I'm half Cape Verdean, I'm part black, I'm part Irish, part German.
You sound like an
English.
American.
Exactly. I just tell my kids, you guys can't hate
Melting
anybody
pot. Right. Don't take a
because you
side.
are everybody. And
We are human, right? That's
exactly.
pretty cool.
That's what I tell people I am. I'm a human.
Well, that's the truth of it, right?
Mhm.
Let's talk a little bit about your work. One thing that's not mentioned in your, I guess, in some new paintings, but you did a couple landscapes, and one was called the Great Wide Open, and that looks maybe like the Grand Canyon.
Yes. In fact, the two landscapes that you have are Grand Canyon, both of them. One of them, which was, oh gosh, what the heck was it? It sold almost like right
Yes,
away.
right away. Yeah,
The Great Wide Open you still have. And that one, oh,
right.
I had a blast doing that one. It's 22 by 40, I think. I started painting larger as, this year, really, I've kind of started. But the other painting was another Grand Canyon piece, and it sold right away. It was a smaller piece, about 16 by 20, I think it was.
Yeah, here's a smaller piece.
And it just, I've kind of avoided doing a lot of landscapes because in the old days, I didn't used to like to paint trees or clouds.
Right.
I've kind of gotten into them as I've gotten older.
Well,
And I,
the bulk of the work
yes.
is mostly on paper. And so what I found unique was that that's an oil painting on canvas, right?
Well, actually, that one, those are acrylic.
Or they're acrylic. Okay.
And I'm actually doing a lot of my newer paintings are acrylic paintings
Okay.
on canvas and canvas board. Um, I've just I had this casual conversation with a gallery owner in Sedona, and she's also a friend, and she made the observation, which I don't agree with, that oh, I never carry works on paper. Most galleries, because they're not durable. And I said, well, what are you doing? Are you changing oil on top of it? It's a painting. It goes on a wall.
Right.
But obviously, some people, they have preferences and things like that. But I said, maybe I'll try painting on canvas again. I hadn't done it in a long time, and I've recently, in the last about 6 or 7 years, I've started painting a lot more on canvas. And a lot of the ones that I've been doing are that way. I do like painting on paper still because of the convenience. One thing I like about canvas is you don't have to frame, you don't have to put glass and mats on them for one thing.
Right.
You can, but I like canvas just because I like the durability of being able to paint with acrylics too. It's a very forgiving medium. I've painted with oils, but not in years. I learned back when I was in high school. And I like acrylic because of the way that I work. I'm a fast worker, so I like that acrylics dry fast and enables me to, move on to a section without putting my hand right through a painting. I'm left-handed also, so I've learned to work backwards as I've lived my long life. But I prefer that a medium that dries faster. And that's what I like about acrylic. I worked a lot in gouache, which is the paper stuff. I've done a lot on paper with gouache, and watercolor.
Explain to our audience what gouache is. It's a form of watercolor, but what's the textural difference?
Gouache is an opaque watercolor. It's like acrylic, only if acrylic was workable. It was used a lot in commercial art. And that's kind of where I started using it in college in my commercial art illustration classes. And I just really liked the versatility of it versus regular watercolor. Because with gouache, you can paint light over dark. It's both additive and subtractive. You can also pull paint out of it and it looks good. With watercolor, you can really kind of beat up a surface if you do that. Gouache is a little more forgiving in that manner. And that's what I like about it.
It seems a lot more easier to control than just watercolor, which saturates into the paper. Where gouache, you can keep your lines a lot easier, I think.
Yes, you can.
A lot of artists prefer that, the gouache over pure watercolor.
And like I said, because of the fact that you can paint light over the dark, but also you can use gouache really thin like watercolor. I don't think the colors are necessarily as vibrant, but they're not as transparent, but you do get a lot of that feeling with it. and it's been a very good medium for me.
So let's talk about a few of the subject matters.
Yeah.
What is it that you love about old cars and painting them? I mean, they're all rustied out, and
Oh yeah.
they have a life story somewhere in there, right?
Oh, absolutely. And when I first started really noticing them in the neighborhoods where I grew up in some not so nice neighborhoods, and there would be beat up, stripped cars lying by the side of the road and things like that. And I never thought of them as an art subject back in those days. But when I was in college, I'd gone to these watercolor workshops, and we always went out to these farms, and they always had old wrecks of cars that were just sitting there by the side of a road or by the side of on a farm site or something like that. And I've come to find out, of course, that New Mexico is the best place for those kind of things.
Of
They
course
are
it
just
is.
everywhere. I love it. And, to me, it's one of the great subject matter. I mean, in Arizona, it seems like just about every space is occupied with people living on it. So
Right.
there's not a lot of room for old wrecks of cars and things like that. But in New Mexico, you could see them everywhere. And you see them on farms, of course, because when a vehicle breaks down on a farm, they'll scavenge it for parts. So they'll keep it. And then weeds will end up growing through it. Maybe birds end up nesting in it, snakes, who knows what else. But, they become very beautiful, especially when the paint goes off and they get that rusty patina to them. And, it's a very strong subject matter for me. And like I said, I wasn't driving back when I first did these things. And
That's interesting. Maybe that's the infatuation with cars.
oh, absolutely. And to me, when I was a kid, a trip in a car was a big deal. We didn't drive. We didn't get to ride in cars very much. We took the bus, we took the train, the subway. So whenever you got to get into a car, something magic or something big was going to happen. So that's kind of been my love affair with this subject matter, is going places, looking out the window, just seeing the world as we went by. And and I drove back and forth across the country a few times during college, and I hardly ever slept because I was so busy looking at stuff. But yes, I love that sort of subject matter, the old rusted towns and cars and signs, and just that thing. The West just really excited that nerve in me, I suppose.
It reminds me of the back roads of Taos or Espanola.
Oh, absolutely. Any of those. And that was the thing I loved about New Mexico, is you can drive and there's nothing, and then all of a sudden there's a town. In Massachusetts, it's so crowded, so it wasn't like that at all. Arizona is kind of like that, but not quite as much. There are places where you can go some long stretches, and you start to see some stuff that looks like New Mexico, but really, my love affair almost is with New Mexico. There's something about that state, and I did go to college there. My wife and I were almost going to live there, but then we missed it by one state and went to Arizona and lived in Phoenix for a while. But the thing with those, just the allure of those small towns, you're driving and driving, and then around the corner there'll be that mobile sign or something like that just waiting there. It's very, it had to have felt good to people just driving along to finally see some civilization. And that's kind of the way that I would always feel when I would drive in New Mexico, especially from Portales, because you got to go 20 miles to Clovis, which is the next town over. Or if you went towards Roswell, you'd see nothing for almost the 92 miles you go to Roswell, other than Elida, this one little town that you could almost throw a football through.
So now that you're driving, you're really getting out there and taking pictures everywhere.
Oh my goodness, absolutely! I will get in a car and go anywhere on a moment's notice. You want to go somewhere? Well, let's go. That's how I am, and I do. I love exploring. It's just something I've never really gotten to do, and until I went to college, and it just really took off for me. I was a kid, when I was in high school, I would take the train and the bus out to neighborhoods and places I didn't know just to see something different. And that's what I loved about coming out west, was it definitely lived up to the hype for me. I'd only seen it in magazines before.
Yeah, I think that's that's wonderful to get out there and experience. That's a whole different thing than just going on looking for files and something similar.
Oh, exactly.
Let's talk about the the signage,
Yes.
tell us what you find so wonderful about painting signs and stuff. And these are older signs, right? Is it like
Yes.
or what is it? What are they,
Well,
neon?
they are old neon signs. I mean, people are making new LED signs that are starting to look pretty sharp, and that might have to, some of those might have to enter my repertoire.
Uh,
But what I always liked about them was the fact that they were kind of falling apart. And most people, when they think of those signs, they think of them at night when they light up the highway sky and things like that. But to me, I was always fascinated by the shadows off them. And some of my paintings, such as I have one behind me, the Blue Swallow Motel that I'll be unveiling, at the opening. It's also a commission that's been bought. But I always loved the long shadows, late in the day or early in the day that you get on those neon signs that the tubes would make across the letters. And
mhm,
I did a painting of the Saints and Sinners sign in Espanola. And
Very, very
that was,
famous.
oh yes, oh yes. And that was a chance to show some of that off. And I've got some newer paintings that are coming in that have that as well. But yeah, that was the thing where I got started. I went on a trip to California during a spring, it was Christmas break actually with a friend. And I was pulled up at this gas station. It was a mobile station. And it wasn't the old stuff, the old graphics or anything, but it was this guy outside of his Ford Pinto, had on a trench coat, kind of, a real character, some LA character, filling his tank, and up above it was the big mobile sign. It had a piece taken out of it and things like that. And I said, those signs look really cool. I'm going to make that. And I started taking pictures of stuff like that.
Mm.
Most people take pictures of their
How
families and
long
their.
ago was that? Because the Ford Pinto, you have
Oh,
to go
that.
back to the 70s.
I'm sorry. That was actually not quite to the 70s, but that was about 43 years ago.
Okay.
I graduated from college in 1983, so it was about 43 years ago. I took that trip out to LA, and I was into punk rock then. We were going to see bands and stuff like that, and it was a blast. But I just remember this guy, at that gas station. I took pictures of that, and I took some pictures of the old theaters in LA too, because I was doing some paintings of them. I did one of the Wiltern Theater that I'd had years ago, and I sold it years ago. But I'm actually going to possibly do some more of those.
Oh, nice.
I've got reference. My son goes to USC, so whenever I go out there, I always take lots of pictures.
Hmm.
But the old theaters in all of the small towns, I had this wish, this fantasy to go through Texas and go to all of those small old dusty towns and shoot their movie theaters that are
Hmm.
in whatever state they're in and do paintings of them. And I call the show the Last Picture Show, just like the movie from the 70s.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's
Because it's
pretty awesome.
and those things, it's part of an America that's going away, really. It's dying, as we become more, everybody's streaming, people don't go to the movies. They certainly don't go to those little movie houses anymore. In small towns, it might be the only thing that those people have for entertainment other than, going down the 7-Eleven and picking fights, maybe. Just kidding. But I think that the old movie theater, the old center of town, there was just a lot of character there. And every time when I go back to Portales, I feel the same way. I will shoot lots of images, and I'll have lots of stuff to paint. Another thing I like to paint is that I haven't really done much for you yet is reflections. I love, window reflections in storefronts. And that's kind of what really got me started on realism, really. When I was in college, I worked at the library, and I would see books of paintings by the photorealists. And that was certainly an influence on me, along with people like Norman Rockwell and Edward Hopper, artists like Richard Estes and Robert Cottingham. Those were people that, I saw their work and I was like, wow, people can paint like that. It was amazing to me, that level of realism. And,
Well,
while I feel like my stuff has a little bit of the human element in it,
it does.
it's still, the overall effect is realism and towards photorealism. And Estes would do these window reflections, and I just said, that is a great subject. I mean, you can really layer something, in a really cool way doing that, and it just, it's the kind of thing people walk by all the time and don't think of them as subject matter, and here it is.
Yeah. Well, you're doing a fantastic job. We're really excited to. One last question before we end this. How did you get my attention?
I was banging my head against the wall trying to figure out how am I going to get back into galleries. I used to have shows occasionally about 30 something years ago, back when I had only one child. And as my family grew and I got out there into the workforce, I kind of had to put my fine art aspirations to the side. So when I decided to get back in, I thought, well, am I going to, I would love to be in Santa Fe, I thought, but how am I, there's no way I'm going to get into Santa Fe, but I'm going to send stuff out anyway. So I took the old school approach. I know most of the artists now, everybody does email, everybody says, hey, go look at my website. So why make you do the work? I decided I'm going to put prints into an envelope, just like the old days, with a little note. I'm going to hand sign the envelope and I'm going to send these out to people. And I sent out a few of them, and one of them was to your gallery, which actually was a gallery I was hoping would get my
What
attention.
what was the verbiage on the envelope that got my attention? What did you put
Oh, it was probably something about, yeah, I'm taking an old school approach to marketing. And that's, and my background is in marketing. So for me, taking that old school approach, it was something I had kind of learned from this friend of mine who just passed away a couple of years ago too, where he would always send out packages to clients and letters and things like that people don't do anymore. Everybody will just email people. And when you send someone something that's tactile that they have to look at and have to open, I mean, because it's handwritten, you're going to open it. It's not ticking. You can open it.
Well, I get, 20, 30 inquiries a week of people.
Oh, I can imagine.
And I do open all of them. But Peter's usually, who works for us, he's the head of acquisitions at Blue Rain. Normally that goes through him and then we discuss it as a board. But in this case, it got my attention. I was like, and what I really liked was that you're underexposed for the type of talent you're offering. And so this is a good time to consider Tony's work. It's very affordable and it's a good time to get in on it before the prices go up as we go along this journey together. Tony, I'd like to thank you for participating in the podcast today, Blue Rain Gallery Podcast.
Leroy, it's been a blast. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. I want to encourage everybody to sign up for our podcast, share it with your friends. It's really cool to get to know people like Tony DeLuz or all of the other artists that we're interviewing or collectors or whatever we're doing. It's kind of fun. So you can subscribe on any of the platforms. You can also watch our podcast on blueraingallery.com under the menu bar podcast. We'd also like to encourage everybody to visit our online store by going to bluerainprintshop.com and bring art into your everyday life. Thank you, Tony.
You're very welcome. Thank you, everybody.